Shalom. So who wrote the Bible? And is the Bible a so-called white man's book? There are a lot of Negroes or so-called blacks that believe the Bible was written by white men or Caucasians. But we know when we study history and we look at geography, etc., that the book is not about so-called white people at all or Caucasians. But oftentimes in the colored destinations of Hasatan's kingdom, we're classified by color, destinations, or corporate destinations. And don't get it twisted. A lot of people have been brainwashed or conditioned to believe that the people who are depicted in movies, books, etc., are the ancient Israelites or biblical people of the book. And don't get it twisted. When we look at movies about our people in slavery and roots and many other movies, the conditioning, kind of like a psychological warfare of the mind, a clusterfuck. This is where a lot of people are distrustful of the scriptures because they haven't been taught the true essence of the book and what it is truly about, or the mystery of iniquity, meaning what? The pagan or the other Babylonian Kemetic mystery religions that are mentioned in the scriptures, but you have to understand the other cultures and what was around the Israelites and so forth. So the concept of whiteness as a racial category distinct from other forms of social and cultural identity emerged in the 17th century. So this is way before the 1611 King James Bible and so forth. So can we honestly say that King James was not a so-called white man because that term did not exist? And we also know that the original Europeans or the Aboriginal Europeans were people of color or melanated. Quiet is kept. When we read books like Nature Knows No Color Line, the Negro rulers of Scotland and the British Isles. So the Caucasian or quote unquote white race are nothing but invaders. But reading on, particularly in the context of European colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade, it was a social construct, not a biological reality, developed to justify and maintain power structures. You can also read the book Ancient and Modern Britons, Volume 1 and Volume 2 by David McRitchie, a so-called white man or Caucasian who comes to the truth or the reality that his predecessors, the people that came before him, were swarthy or Moors or Negroes. Reading on, the pre-17th century, before the 17th century, people primarily identified themselves through religion, ancestry, ethnicity, or nationality, not by skin color or a concept of a unified white race.
So I did a video that illuminated the fact that there were no white people in the Bible. Well, some of y'all got really upset, like this guy. First of all, for everybody who left an angry comment, thank you. The comments really helped bump the algorithm. The video kind of blew up. What was my point? One, the concept of whiteness didn't exist until about the 16th century. So nobody in the Bible was perceived as white, nor would they have perceived themselves as white, regardless of the shade of their skin. The concept literally didn't exist. Two, for all of you who said, what about the Romans? Well, the Romans, what's a Roman? The Roman Empire extended from Scotland all the way to the Nile. They were literally every color under the sun, but they also had a lot of folks mixed in from North Africa and the Middle East that became the Southern Italians, still not what we would traditionally call white under our current perception. And third, I was attempting to point out the irony behind the fact that the Bible has been used to justify race-based slavery and white supremacy over the years, despite the fact there's no white people in the Bible.
The 17th century and beyond, the idea of whiteness as a distinct racial category arose in the 17th century in the Americas, particularly in the English colonies. So this is why we are called so-called black, they're called so-called white, etc. This is a social construct. And not to digress too much off the topic, but Chat GPT and the AI component is really kicking their asses for a lot of the belief systems or a lot of their theologian schools or whatnot. So, this whole life pretty much is scripted, especially, them living in their lives. So right here it reads, the assertion that the Bible is a white man's book is a misconception that doesn't align with the geographical origins of the text or the diverse ethnicities represented in its narratives. So when you hear some of these ignorant Christians or people, who don't believe or whatnot, that's their own opinion. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. They'll use the Middle East, etc. Okay, that term wasn't coined until the 19th century. And of course, you'll hear them say, well, Jesus wasn't black. Okay, he wasn't white either, because those terms didn't come to around the 17th century. We know that historically, if you're going to believe the text, he was a Judean. Okay, he was from the tribe of Judah, from the 12 tribes of Israel. Right here it reads, geographical origins. The Bible was written by people from Asia, not Europe. The events of the Bible center around the Middle East, a region with a diverse ethnic and cultural tapestry, not a single homogeneous white population. I repeat, not a single homogeneous white population. Diverse ethnicities. The Bible mentions numerous people and nations, including Egyptians, Israelites, Hittites, Cushites, which are modern day Ethiopians, Canaanites, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans, demonstrating a wide array of backgrounds involved in and interacting with the biblical narrative. All we have to do is read Amos 9 and 7. Now we're at Amos 9 and 7. We're going to read from the NIV version. Are not you Israelites the same to me as the Cushites? Meaning what? The modern day Ethiopians, declares the Lord Yahweh. Did I not bring Israel up from Egypt, the Philistines from Captor, and the Arameans from Ker? And of course, right now we're having this beef with, quote unquote, Africans or from that continent, because a lot of them are trying to usurp or destiny or destination swap, I should say, us so-called Black Americans over here. But we must remember, we do have a lot of our people over there. I hear sometimes the nonsense, well, Africans can't grow beard. Well, a lot of our people, some of our people from the Americas were shipped over there to the west parts of Africa as well. Quiet is kept. So right here it reads, Israelite identity. The Israelites, the central figures in the Old Testament, were a Shemitic people from the quote unquote Middle East, a region known for its culture and ethnic diversity. The biblical narrative also depicts interactions and intermarriage with individuals from other ethnic groups, such as Moses marrying a Cushite, meaning what? An Ethiopian woman. So we're going to look at this book right here called Hebrewisms of West Africa by Joseph J. Williams. We're also going to look at the Book of Mormons. Okay. Even though some of us believe that this book is false, which a lot of it, a lot of insertions, whatnot. But basically, the Book of Mormons is the documentation of the Hebrews coming to America or whatnot. History and culture of the Black Aboriginals of the United States by Dr. Clyde Winters. We also have this book right here, The Historic Gruns, of course, depicted here, the Aboriginal or the Indian. Notice the hair. Okay. Of course, the One World Tartarians, the greatest civilization ever to be erased from history, and Ancient America. So we're going to start right here, chapter 5, the Lost Tribes of Israel. We're going to start right here. However, as Professor Dixon says, a few generations ago, cultural parallels between the customs and beliefs of Aboriginal peoples, I repeat, of Aboriginal peoples, and those of the Hebrews, as recorded in the Bible, were explained in accordance with the theories of the times as the degenerate survivals of ancient Shemitic culture diffused by the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Traces of these extremely elusive wanderers were found in every quarter of the globe, and Bushman and Eskimo, Australian and American Indian were alike credited with being their descendants. Okay. Now, when we go to the American Dictionary of the English language, we're going to go to Aboriginal. Okay. Right here. Aboriginal. First, original, primitive, Aboriginal people are the first inhabitants of a country. Aboriginal tribes of America. The first settlers in a country are called Aboriginals, as the Celts in Europe and Indians in America. Not the Indians or pretendians that you see today, the $5 Indian. This book is not talking about them. This is talking about the black Indians, okay? The so-called black Indians or whatnot. Even when you look up the word American, let's go to that right quick. Right here. American, pertaining to America. America, noun, a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. So now we're back in the book, Hebrewisms of West Africa, The Lost Tribes, page 133. Nothing is to be gained then by trying to trace these northern tribes further at the present time, lacking the spirit of the southern kingdom, meaning what? The kingdom of Judah. They quickly became assimilated and lost their identity, being absorbed by the peoples with whom they dwelt. Sounds a lot like the Negro, right? He wants to absorb everyone else's culture. And then we got a lot of tethers over here that say we have no culture. Okay, but culture is traced through religion, deity, customs, and so forth. American Indians. Before drawing this chapter to a close, however, a word must be said about the theory, it's not really a theory, of those who would find among the American Indians evidences. Before drawing this chapter to a close, however, a word must be said about the theory of those who would find among the American Indians. Before drawing this chapter to a close, however, a word must be said about the theory of those who would find among the American Indians evidences of descent from the ancient Hebrews. In one way, the question is closely aligned to that of the lost tribes. And even in the case of those who proselyte for the Indians a Judean origin, or at least a diffusion of Judean culture, the matter is best settled here, as it may easily becloud the treatment of our own subject if reserved until later. Now we're going to look at this book, History and Culture of the Black Aboriginals of the United States by Dr. Clyde Winters. Okay, right here. American or Indian race found only in America is of a deep copper color, straight black hair, high cheekbones, eyes black, and sunken large faces and robust bodies. Okay. This race comprises all the American Indians except the Eskimo, who belongs to the Asiatic race. Okay, as you can see right here. The American Indian or Negro, or the Israelite, the tribe of Ephraim. Okay, and right here, the Negro. The African or Negro race. Okay, they have a jet black skin, low, narrow foreheads, black, woolly hair, thick lips, and long heels.
What I'm about to show you is Muhammad Ali, in which he was being interviewed by ABC in 1976. on a program called This Day Tonight, where he was discussing why he threw his Olympic gold medal in the Ohio River. Okay, now what's interesting to note is what he says in his own words at this point of the video. I'm gonna play it.
At the time in 1958, we couldn't eat in the restaurants in Louisville. We couldn't eat downtown. One day I saw two Africans go in with their robes and their turbans. They couldn't speak English. I heard the man say, "Let them in, they're not Negroes."
You heard that? Now, for clarity purposes, let's play it again.
One day I saw two Africans go in with their robes and their turbans. They couldn't speak English. I heard the man say, "Let them in, they're not Negroes."
Okay. Now that we heard what he said loud and clear, what could be the reason why Africans will be treated differently than Negroes at that time? If we were taught that Negroes are actually the long lost descendants of Africans. Think about that.
One day I saw two Africans go in with their robes and their turbans. They couldn't speak English. I heard the man say, "Let them in, they're not Negroes." I said, "Something's wrong. I can't say it's because I'm black, because they're so black and they're blue, but they went in." So I said, "Well, I get my Olympic gold medal, then I'll go in." I went and got my gold medal, went back in, ordered 2 cheeseburgers, and they said, "Sorry, we don't serve Negroes." I said, "I don't eat them either, just give me 2 cheeseburgers." And she said, "You're getting smart." She called the manager and he said something about, "I don't care who he is." She said, "Cassius Clay, I don't care who he is." Anyway, the motorcycle gang came in and we had this fight, you read, but the idea was I couldn't eat there, so I got so angry.
Right here, you see the parallels, okay? Now we're going to go to the Apocrypha, which is in the 1611 King James Bible, or you can buy it on its own. We're going to go to 2nd Esdras, chapter 13. We're going to start at verse 40, the lost tribes, or the 10 tribes. Right here. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the same time of Osei the king, whom Salmanasar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. That land being the Americas, okay? But they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they enter into the Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsonus, pronounced that right. Then dwelt they there until the latter time, and now when they shall begin to come, the highest shall stay the springs of the stream again, that they may go through. Therefore sawest thou the multitude with peace. But those that be left behind of thy people are they that are found within my borders. Now when he destroyeth the multitude of the nations, meaning what? The heathen nations that are gathered together, he shall defend his people that remain, the elect, right? And then shall he show them great wonders. So now we're back at Hebrewisms of West Africa, the lost tribes of Israel. Right here it states, Montezos had told a weird tale of American Indians he had come across in his travels in the New World, of their religious practices and of their traditions that they were of the tribe of Reuben. Okay. Right here, page 136. Yet Deru subsequently admits certain seemingly Hebrewic customs among the American Aborigines. Keyword, American Aborigines, which are what? The copper-colored races, or who today they call Negroes or black people in the Americas, or FBA if you want to go that route. Thus, after rejecting the claims of the two Hebrew practices in America, he concedes other souvenirs of Jewish, and we know it's not Jewish, but it's the Israelite history or Hebrewic history. Jewish history and rites of the Mosaic law seem to have been real and to have actually existed among few of the America's Aboriginal nations. Okay. Reading on, thus are the Yashar'el, pronounce that right, said to have had a tradition according to which they originally came from the far east, passing through the sea which the Most High had made dry for them. And again, we may close this chapter with the remark that the Mexicans celebrated the Jewish feast of the New Year. Now, when it's talking about the Mexicans right here, it's not talking about the people who claim to be Mexican today. Those are hybrids, okay? Or a mixture with Spaniards, descendants of Esau, basically. But the Aboriginal Mexicans or whatnot, that's what it's in reference to. So here are some examples of what today they call Afro-Mexicans or Aboriginal Mexicans, okay? Of course, we see the melon. Look at the hair, coarse, woolly, and kinky. Now, most people are going to say, well, these are just slaves from Africa because they indoctrinated the whole world to believe that every single person of color comes from Africa. Out of Africa is nothing but a theory. It hasn't been proven. All these Afro-Latinos are quote-unquote Aboriginal or black Mexicans. Okay.
African descendants reside in Mexico. And Cuanacualapa is the blackest city in Mexico. Join us today as we reconnect with the African diaspora in Mexico. Afro Mexico, here we come. De La Vega. This isn't a story of slavery. This isn't a story of overcoming.
And had their festivity of the remission of sins and the use of sacred unctions as the Jews. We know it's not talking about the modern Jews, the people who call themselves Jews today. This is talking about the Judeans, okay? The Judeans, not the people who identify as quote-unquote Jews today. Okay? Right here, page 139. Indians were descended from the 10 tribes of Israel, and that an exodus of Jews or Judeans from Jerusalem took place prior to the birth of Christ and carried away the records, a part of which was the Book of Mormon. Now, we know that the Book of Mormon has a lot of insertions and a lot of discrepancies. But at the end of the day, when we view this book, or at least when I view it, it's a record of the Hebrews, or a documentation of the Hebrews, the coming to the Americas, okay? And how do we know that? Well, we're just cross-referencing, right? It says, this book it is asserted was discovered by the prophet Joseph Smith, who turned this book into a religion in the side of a hill called Kumara in Ontario County, New York. Confessions of John Doe Lee, Danite, New York, 1905. So let's look at this book right here. Okay, of course I made old notes a long time ago. Okay. Wherefore it is a abridgment of the record of the people of Nephi, and also of the Lamanites, written to the Lamanites, who are a remnant of the house of Israel, meaning what? Ephraim. Okay, the two sticks, Joseph and Judah, right? And also to the Judean and Gentile. Okay, right here. Introduction. The Book of Mormon is a volume of Holy Scripture comparable to the Bible. It is a record of the Most High's dealings with ancient inhabitants of the Americas. Key word, the Most High's dealings with the ancient inhabitants of the Americas, and contains the fullness of the everlasting gospel. Okay, the book was written by many ancient prophets, not by so-called white people, by the spirit of prophecy and revelation. Their words written on gold plates were quoted and abridged by a prophet or historian named Mormon. Okay, and of course, the ancient inhabitants look like this. Okay. So now we're at the New Oxford Annotated Bible. 1 Kings chapter 12, we're going to start at verse 28. So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. He said to the people, you have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. He set one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one at Bethel, and before the other as far as Dan. So they didn't go 3 times like they were supposed to. They went to the tribe of Dan. He also made houses on high places and appointed priests from among all the people who were not Levites, because the Levites were the priests, right? Verse 32, Jeroboam appointed a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival that was in Judah, and he offered sacrifices on the altar. So he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves that he had made. Idolatry. And he placed in Bethel the priest of the high places that he had made. He went up to the altar that he had made in Bethel on the 15th day in the 8th month, and in the month that he alone had devised. He appointed a festival for the people of Israel, and he went up to the altar to offer incense. So basically, the Israelites, or the Northern Kingdom, went off. And basically, the people kept fucking up, just like our people do today, worshiping idols and error, and not knowing what they do. There's nothing new under the sun. And when they came over to the Americas, when they started worshiping buffaloes or jaguars, when you see the Indian mount with the buffalo, the certain carvings that they made, they just substituted the creatures or animals over there and then replaced them with what we see over here. And I'll show an example of that later. So right here, we're going to look at this book, Masterpieces. Okay. Doesn't look like a slave, does it? Moor with emerald cluster. Blackamoor with a artificial Saxon cluster. So right here it states, the young athletic man in dark brown pure wood striding along in an elegant and length fashion presents the Colombian emerald cluster on a tray in a tortoiseshell. Yet he is not a blackamoor, keyword, he is not a blackamoor, but judging from his garments and jewelry, a South American Indian. Okay. South American Indian. His tattoos, as well as his precious necklaces, bracelets, breastplate, keyword, breastplate like Aaron, another custom, feathered crown, okay, feathered crown, loincloth, and footwear clearly show that he is a native South American, okay? Other words, he's part of the Jin tribes or a Hebrewic man. I mean, look at this, similar to the breastplate of Aaron. Why would they be wearing this? Okay, because they know that they come from the tribes of Israel. Okay, these were manufactured after a copperplate engraving in Dillinger's workshop. The second figure of a blackamoor represents a artificial Saxon cluster symbolizing Saxony's wealth in silver and precious stone deposits. Okay. The two impressive blackamoors are neither servants nor slaves, but appear to be of royal blood, meaning what? Blue blood. Blue just means blue means black, the blue man. The way they present their riches express power and freedom. Okay. The sculptures representing the clusters have been a part of the collection of the jewel room since 1729. So since 1729, they know who you are. That's why they had to reclassify you and say that you always came from Africa. This is why they had to classify you as African and with Walter Pecker, whatever that dude's name is, eugenics. Fucked a whole lot of shit up. Okay. American royal princes, who from 1722 lived in Dresden as the property of an English captain, where they were presented to the amazed public. The king took the two natives into his royal household. They were baptized as Lutherans and eventually passed on to the Tsarina of Russia. Okay, so this is what they were doing. They were taking Israelites or Hebrewic people that practiced Judaism or knew who they were. And of course, the king, if the king was Christian or Catholic, whatever false religion, the people had to abide by that. And if you didn't, you were expelled and, kicked out of the land and so forth. So you had a lot of Israelites converting to Christianity or whatnot. So, Christianity has nothing to do with the Bible. Christianity is nothing but the Babylonian Kemetic mystery religion and so forth. But I digress on that. And of course, here's the back. You can see his woolly hair, letting you know that this is a Negro, a so-called black person. So now we're at internetarchive.com, the book Light and Truth. Right here, page 270. Several prophetic traits of character given of the Hebrews do accurately apply to the Aborigines of America. Meaning what? They're copper-colored races or people that have a brown, tawny, or swarthy complexion, right? Intemperance may be first noted. Isaiah, writing about the time of the expulsion of Israel from Canaan and about to predict their restoration, says, Isaiah 28, woe to the crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim. Okay. Ephraim was a noted name of the 10 tribes of Israel. Okay. The northern kingdom. The crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim, shall be trodden under feet, for all the tables shall be full of vomit and filthiness, so that there is no place clean. In the course of the descriptions of their drunkenness, that of their rejection and restoration is blended, that the Lord Yahweh, by a mighty one, would cast him down to the earth, and their glorious beauty should be like that of a rich flower in a fertile valley, which droops, withers, and dies. But in time the Most High will revive it. In that day shall the Lord Yahweh of hosts be for a crown of glory and for a diadem of beauty unto the residue of this people. None who the character of the Indians in relation to intemperance need to be informed that this picture does most singularly apply to them. So which Indians is he talking about? The Indians or the Aboriginals or FBA, the people, the so-called black people here in the Americas. Okay. And I'll stop at that. But the book is called Light and Truth. Now we're going to be reading from this book, The 10 Tribes of Israel, The True History of North American Indian by Timothy R. Jenkins, okay, 1885. So now we're on page 37, State of the Judeans. We're going to start right here. From this representation, it appears that the posterity of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are still God's particular people, that he brought them with a mighty arm from Egypt by the way of the wilderness and through the Red Sea, or some people refer to as the Reed Sea, that he gave them laws and ordinances to which he commanded the most strict obedience. And in the case of failure and willful disobedience, the severest curses were denounced upon them. They were to be divided into 2 nations, meaning what? The 2 sticks, okay? To be scattered among the Gentiles, meaning what? The other nations, the heathens, in context. To the north and the south, to the east and the west. They were to be driven by the hand of the Most High to the utmost parts of the earth, into Assyria, Egypt, let me go back. Let me see. They were to be driven by the hand of the Most High to the utmost parts of the earth, into Assyria, Egypt, Patros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and into the western regions and the land of Sinim. They were to serve gods, the workmanship of man's hand of wood and stone, like the cross, which is pagan. Israel is heavily charged with stubborn disobedience, meaning what? They're very stiff-necked, like our people, and is threatened with being cut off suddenly, as in one day, and with great accumulated distress and anguish. They are expressly charged with the sin of drunkenness. There's that word again. Ephraim is getting charged with drunkenness, or Issachar, You see a lot of Indians with that habit, right? As adding drunkenness to thirst as their prevailing sin. On the other hand, the promises to them are very great in case of obedience or on sincere repentance in the case of failure.